I am honored to have the privilege of interviewing the Dr. Mr. No, I'm joking. The Eric Browne. I used to always say we were cousins from a different mama because we have the same last name. But I'm going to give a little information about what I remember of your legacy. And you can fill in any holes that may be there. I'm sure there may be some, but you are from North Alabama.
Correct. Yep.
What part exactly?
So born in Huntsville, and then I graduated from Arab High School, which is just south of Huntsville.
Okay, great. So it's so good to have you down south, so to speak. You have built an incredible program at Baker High School in Mobile County Public School Systems that has gleaned awards from Trumbauer and Thespian for their, not only have they been awarded for their abilities on stage, but you've been awarded for the shows that you've been able to direct and produce. And you have a stellar reputation as an educator. And I want to say, are you a national certified educator?
Yeah, so I just got my national board. Yeah, national board certification. 2 years ago. So
yeah, I remember when you got that, and I'm so excited and proud of you for that. That's not easy to achieve.
It was a journey, that's for sure. But I love it, and I'm all the better for it. But yeah, it took a hot minute.
Yeah. Not everybody can do it, and that's what makes educators who get that certification stand out, because they've been able to work so hard in that journey and that process. So I want to give an opportunity for you to talk about your path to where you've gotten so far in your career. What we talk about in Amp Up Arts in the webinar is arts advocacy, and how we can, in our individual perspective spaces, increase the art exposure to the children throughout the state of Alabama, which is our goal, our mission. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into theater and education, and how those paths have informed your approach towards advocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in a way had, I was very blessed in that when I was in high school, I had a theater teacher, Miss Jordan, and a musical theater teacher and choir instructor, Mr. Quillen. And it was, for us, Arab being a little small town, I remember when Brian Quillen got there, he and Miss Jordan had plans on doing a musical, right? And I know that, Mr. Quillen started with, our first musical, and he was like, we wanted to be this really, really big deal, right? We wanted to have a strong musical theater program. And I think being there for that first year and watching him grow that theater department to the point where they were going, they were winning national competitions after I left, putting on like $40,000, $50,000 productions. Really, to see that whole community kind of light up.
Yeah.
And once again, very, small town, rural community. And to see like them winning national competitions, and like, the musical theater group at the high school being this sort of iconic feature to the town. So I think watching that happen and seeing like the passion he brought to it, it also made me really want to be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I went to University of Montevallo for my BFA. So I studied acting and directing. And of course, during my 4 years there, my focus was a lot more like professional theater.
Yeah.
Like the time I got to senior year, I was like, okay, I'm going to move to New York. And, but like, I didn't have that, like, I've tried waiting tables for a while. I hated waiting tables. I was terrible at it. And I was just like, okay, like I've got to come up with like, what is my survival thing? If I move to the Big Apple tomorrow, how am I going to survive? And, a friend of mine called and said, hey, my former teacher from Alma Bryant is retiring, and they're looking for a theater teacher. Would you have any interest in teaching high school? And I said, well, yeah, I was interested in it, back in the day, but sure, I'll give it a shot and see, maybe save up some money to move. And I'll never forget, after my second year, I had plans on moving. I was going to move back and save money, moving to back to the Birmingham area with some friends. And I had a U-Haul like ready to go. And I hadn't told anyone that like this was my last year. And I think seeing my students' reaction after that performance, it was our first musical at Alma Bryant. Just like they did a big speech on stage. They had flowers for me, like this, all the kids were very emotional. And I think that was the moment where I just kind of said like, okay, there's no reason to move. I think I have found what I want to do here.
Wow.
So I think seeing how important it was for the students, and once again, in a very small town, Biola Battery, Grand Bay area, much like what I had come from in Arab, but just seeing how the arts and how theater could bring not just the students together, but also the community get together, right?
Right.
And so it really helps them believe in themselves, and I think it also shocks and awes the parents and the staff to see what their kids are capable of. Like 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh my God, I never knew that my child had that in them,
Right.
So yeah, and I think when I started noticing that it gives students that same sense of belonging that it gave me when I was in high school. Like, I was always been a big guy. I was the guy that they wanted to play football, but then, had no interest whatsoever in football whatsoever. And so it's like, once again, I've started identifying it that's something that was important to me growing up, and was such a big part of who I am, that, somehow I ended up just continuing on doing that. And I'm on just finished year 19 of it. So
That's incredible. 19 years. Round of applause for being an educator for 19 years, but also a theater instructor, which is a different experience and different challenges versus, more of an academic instructor. But what stood out to me about what you said is that you grew up in where your high school was in a small town, but the inception of this arts program just lit up the community. It brought everybody together, and it continued to grow to the point where they were doing, as you stated, $40,000 and $50,000 productions, which is unheard of in
right.
a
Yeah.
rural area. So, you think about a kid like you who probably didn't have the exposure of the arts on a regular basis. I'm not really 100% sure on that. But the fact that you were able to find your gift, your spark through arts education is what really stood out to me about your experience and story. So kudos to you. And thank you for I want to thank you for your service, like you're in the army or something. But thank you for your service, for helping our children and continuing to be light in spaces where it didn't exist before. As you stated before, you teach, you direct, you coach, you lead in so many other spaces. What keeps you energized and grounded as an artist educator?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's easy. And that is the people I get to work with, period. Right. That is 100% it. And if, I've noticed that like, if I'm with a group of people who are eager to grow and learn, and then I am just happy to be there, and then sometimes you get in environments where it's like pulling teeth and nobody wants to be there. And like, I always say that like, when it gets to a point where if this production is not important to you, then it's not going to be important to me. And so I think definitely the atmosphere that, energizes me is meeting people, and that's not just like students or young people. It's everybody. Any performer eager to learn, who's eager to grow. And I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. I learn every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I learn from my students. I learn from every show I direct. I learn from other artists. So, those challenges have taught me a lot and continue to teach me a lot. But I definitely do well in that sort of environment.
Yeah.
And I've also learned that like there is, while there are some key differences, like teaching high school versus teaching college,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm at both USA and Spring Hill, but then also directing in the community, there are some big differences. But I think that when you boil down to it, it really is being able to lead a group of people to perform something that they have a lot of pride in,
Mm.
and I think something that they have a moment to express themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and once again to do that with joy, to be able to look at it and say, well, this is where we started,
Mm-hmm.
this is how much we've grown, and who knew that we could even do that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very, very beautiful thing, and I do find that in all aspects of where I direct and where I teach. So that's a very comforting through line. So,
Well, I'm so excited that you even have the opportunity to work with people who encourage you, inspire you, energizes you. I think that is what makes or break any type of assignment that we take on in our career, is the people in which we work with, the team, the
right.
collaborative effort. I also want to let our guests know, our watchers, our listeners, if you have any questions, please write in the chat box. If you have questions for Eric or for myself, or you just want to add to the conversation, we want this to be a participatory experience. So please write your questions, write your comments, and you can also share if you want other people to join in. We would love to have more people in to be a part of this conversation. Um, so what does advocacy, because I've been a fan of yours for a few years now. Ever since I met you, I was like, I love this guy. He's amazing. And how did he get his program to be so successful? I was newly started at LaFleur High School, starting a program that had been dormant for over 17 years. And I literally started with no money, no funding in our, budgetary line. I think it was like $98. And I remember asking you once about one of your shows, like, how much was the royalties? Nothing other than the royalties. And you told me it was like a few thousand. And I'm like, whoa,
Right.
how are you able to do this? So my next question, we're going to be talking about advocacy through the arts, because you have had such a great success in advocating for your program, for your students, and for arts at your school. What does advocacy mean to you as a theater teacher? And how has your definition evolved over time? So we're talking about advocacy. What does it mean to you, and how has your definition
Mm-hmm.
changed throughout your career?
Um, for me, I think advocacy starts with knowing what your students need.
Okay.
Um, that way you can foster for that growth, that you can, move for that growth, build that. Um, and I think where it's changed for me is like when I was young, I was 22 and I first started teaching, and it was like, I know 100% what everybody needs, and I'm here to give you the proper theater education. And so sit down, shut up. This is how you do it, right?
At 22, you
At
were like that.
22, I knew everything. I was 10 foot tall and I was bulletproof. And so, but it's so much different now that I've been, teaching for so long. And advocacy, really for me, it changes from year to year when I meet my new crop of students, or I see where is our students' needs. You know, what do we need here in the program, and then where can I go to find that? Where can I advocate for them in the community? And if it's something, for example, right now, I've had a really big push toward career technical for theater, right?
Mhm.
So my national board certification is in career technical education. That's where theater is located, which always kind of surprised me. And I think after going through the process of national board, I kind of went like, oh, okay, yeah, this
Mhm.
is career technical. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, noticing now that we have, for Mobile, the Civic Center has been demolished.
Mhm.
We've had this real big uptick in groups that need to use spaces such as, Baker High School.
Mhm.
And with that, they also need technicians who can work the job, right?
Right.
And so, my advocacy has sort of changed in the sense of like, okay, well, I need to start reaching out to technical, um, you know, people with technical experience in the community, talk about how we get our technicians trained. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Another big one has been parent involvement. Uh,
Yeah, you're great at that, by the way.
well, and I wasn't always. It used to be like, I would see the parents on opening night, and that's what I would introduce myself, And it's so funny now because it's almost like, my parent base, we've all gotten so close that it's just like, when you get to like, if I have a discipline problem, it's literally just a text message away from,
Yeah. Okay. That's
um,
wonderful,
but,
though.
um, but really it's just having like usual meetings, making sure the parents know what's going on. It just eliminates so much confusion
Mm.
and, you know, um, and it's also kind of fostered an environment where the parents want to come help.
Yeah.
And so when we've gotten to the point where like the parents will often come up with a fundraising idea, and it's been lovely because it's like for for a change, it's like they'll swoop in and say like, no, Brown, you don't need to worry about this. You go direct the show, and it's like we're gonna take care of this. And so that has definitely been great. And I think it's also just building connections with the community, right? Um, and once again, anyone in the area that will offer like job shadowing for the students, or
Yeah.
I mean a chance for them to even volunteer for a local theater. We've done um well, and I think too, just like my students, we get together and we go out to see shows at other theater companies. Like we're going
Mhm.
to see what Sunnyside is doing. We're going to
Mhm.
see what USA is doing and Joe Jefferson players. So it's also being active in the community to say that like, you know, um, we're also patrons of the arts, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so it does start building this. Once again, it's that sense of community. You're building it within the classroom. You're building it within your show.
Mhm.
But it's always really cool when we have a production here. You have local actors and performers who are coming to watch the Baker show, and they've may have been in a show with one of the actresses in Chickasaw, and so we have
Yeah.
like Chickasaw comes out to see it, and then Bay Area Performing Arts will have like a whole section that comes to see the show. So um, that has also really helped as well. It's like figuring out, because I think a lot of theater companies try to look at each other as like their enemies or their antagonists,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
instead it's looking at that and saying like all of our local theaters offer something unique,
Yeah. That's
and
true.
being able to just kind of say like hey, so what are some issues you're having,
Yeah.
how have you been able to overcome some of these, or what's your plan for handling this, that, or the other. So that's also a really big one, I think. So
I think what stood out to me, great job by the way, is that identifying the needs and how needs of your students have changed throughout the years.
mhm.
Um, Connecting with parents and building that connection with them, because we do have people who work with Amp Up Arts that are in rural areas in the state of Alabama that may not have as many resources around them, or maybe they're working at schools that don't have arts and a lot of other town centered resources of other people doing the work. The way we have multiple theater companies in the city of Mobile. But one thing that stood out to me that could be encouraging or motivating to them is that you really honed in on connecting with your parents and really allowing them to be supportive. And through the years now, they are relieving you of some stress.
Yeah.
And then also the community connections, you know, not looking at each other as rivals or competition, but just really being of support to one another. So I just think that that's wonderful that you've been able to do that throughout your 19 years and hopefully for the future to come.
Right.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add just one more thing on
Go
that
ahead.
too.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's part of, when we talk about community as well, it's like, you know, you may have a student, like I have a student whose parents own like a lumber company, right?
Wow. That's
So
helpful.
we're building a set, and then the dad says, like, well, hold on, let me donate some stuff, and it's like, it's for a tax write-off, right?
Yeah.
And then, another student, her parent has like a bakery. And so it's like, oh, we're going to have like our big fundraiser every year is the bingo breakfast, right? So we do like a brunch and it's themed with the show. And then we do like bingo. And so like, we'll have parents who will, they may have a business and they donate, here's a gift certificate for, that restaurant that they work at. Or so, I mean, you'd be surprised, like just right there within your own classroom, who you have
The resources.
yeah. And it's like, if it's not something that directly helps with the show, but something that could be used as a fundraiser. And yeah, I will say that we do a lot of fundraising, a lot.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that because a big part of advocacy is getting the funding to do the art in which you're trying to do. And that I think that was probably one of my biggest challenges at LaFleur was getting the funding. How do I fundraise and fundraise successfully? Because all fundraisers are not made equal. So
Yeah.
yeah. Can you share a moment where your work in the arts made a tangible impact on how others, such as your students, families, administrators, view the importance of arts education? I know that being in the arts, sometimes, generally speaking, people can look at it in a certain light, like, extracurricular or an afterthought or, an amenity to the education experience, as if it's not really an integral part of the educational experience. So I would like for you to share a time or a moment when your work made an impact with a group of people, whether it be family, students, administrators, and it changed or shifted their perspective of the importance of the arts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, making sure.
And I'll start with kind of I guess more of, from an administrative standpoint, it was, I remember there being, when we were forming these sort of different academies for our school, and we had like the Fame Academy. And,
Can you tell them what fame means?
yeah, so fine arts, media, and entertainment. And so when they started selecting like what programs would be in Fame Academy, there was a bit of an upset because I don't think it included choir and band, right?
Right.
So, like, in order to follow this track along, it was television, media production, and theater. And I ended up asking the question, like, why were these included? And from the administrative level, they just said, like, we see these as the theater is a field that trains students for career and college readiness. Okay. In that the soft skills that they're learning, the tech preparation, how to do certain, technical skills, things that fit within what I guess context they were looking for. And so I want to say that was one of those key moments where, once again, kind of flipped a switch in my mind to say, I think the parents are even starting to make the case, because, it used to be if your child said that, they were going to be a theater major, it was just kind of like, oh, great, clear out the basement. They're going to be living there for the rest of their lives.
That's exactly what my dad did. He was like, "Oh, how are you going to make money? I just don't understand. Like, what are you going to be?"
Yeah. So, so I think that there've been times, like I said, administrative level, recognizing that like what the students are learning through this process, it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to run and be on Broadway.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that they won't. Like, I have a student who's working in an off-Broadway show right now, has been for years. Several others that are in New York living the dream, but most of my students are not, on that track. But the program is just as important for them. And I think it's because it does, as we were talking earlier, I think before we actually started, building the whole human, right?
Yeah, making
and
good humans.
Seeing administration and parents also saying that like this teaches my child responsibility. This teaches my child proper communication. This teaches my child time management, teamwork.
Yeah.
I'm teaching a summer camp right now, just something fun we do in the summer. But I told the students, I said, there's 6 foundational elements of theater, for this is how I approach it. The 6 elements are self-confidence, imagination, trust, ensemble building, concentration, and observation. Okay. So it's like, these are 6, and we play different games with the 6 elements to kind of build on those skills. But I asked the question yesterday when I was finished. We went through each element and I said, so how is this useful in theater? And then I popped the question, like, how is this useful in everyday life? Like, where do you find self-confidence? How is that important? Not just in theater.
Yeah.
And they, we were getting things like, okay, when you're interviewing for a job, when you are, having to interact with a customer, and then we started talking about like imagination, and that was a tough one, right? Well, how would you possibly need silliness and imagination? And but I said, like, okay, why do we have so many problems, or why do we have social problems? Why do we have problems in our society? And I mentioned, I said, okay, the problems that we have fixed, how do we fix them? And it's like, well, someone had to create a solution. And it's like, right, somebody had to look at a scenario and say, there's no solution to this problem, but imagine, right? I mean, and that's everything from politics, that's everything from, the way our government functions to science and medicine. But it's not just like, I'm going to go paint a pretty picture and create dance on stage. I mean, it is part of that, but there's also like, people who say, what if? Imagine if we totally took this in a different direction. Okay. And those are our pioneers, right? Those are the people that we celebrate. So, so I love when people start making that connection. And I had a student pretty early on, I think it was my 2nd or 3rd year teaching. And I remember the mother coming up to me, and wonderful, wonderful lady, but she was crying, and she just gave me this big hug. And she said, just thank you for helping my son realize what he wants to do. And she said that, at first they had really been pushing him into going into welding, and they had just realized just how passionate he was about what he was doing. And he ended up going into scenic design and actually worked with several professional companies. Basically, his job was taking Broadway sets, and then they would sell the Broadway set and they would shrink them down for a smaller size theater. So he had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, just situations where I think that there is, we start seeing just how important the arts are in our lives, in our daily lives, in our society. And I don't even think we notice that it's there, right? It's almost like imagination and creativity. We don't think about that when we get out of bed and we turn on the radio and we listen to music on the way to work. We don't think about that when we're ordering off of a menu or we see the graphic design on the restaurant or, but yeah, I think those artistic elements are everywhere. And I always get, really happy when people kind of make that connection. So
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited about what you're working on at Baker. I feel like I want to take a class. Like, I don't know. The six elements, or I don't know remind me how you framed it again. What did you call it? The six?
Oh, six fundamental elements. Yeah.
Six fundamental elements sound amazing. And the fact that you're making the kids or asking the students to critically identify how these elements are already working in our society and how they would continue to work for them in their individual lives is mind blowing. I would encourage you to maybe go to a school board meeting and ask them the same thing, because the truth is the arts is all around us. We
Yeah.
experience the arts on an everyday basis, but we being, generally speaking, society has such a limited point of view of what it can be, but
Yeah.
it's literally all around us every single day. And I love how you push them to identify how imagination has been used in society. Wonderful. I know that you're already headed in this direction for this question, but we're going to use this as a really nice segue. How do you intentionally create space for students to for students' voices to emerge and be heard in your classroom or your productions? So I know you give them the space and empower them for their voices to be heard. I would love for you to let us know how you intentionally create space for that to happen.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, is building trust with my students for them to know that um, they are loved no matter what, right? And that is, this is a welcoming environment, making sure that I set up classroom norms and expectation for those students and are very clear at the beginning. Beyond that, it's giving them the choice, right? There is, I may pick the production that we're doing for that season,
Mm-hmm.
but with our competitions, with our projects we do in class, it is, find something that is important to you, something that speaks to you, something that you have a personal connection with. Because if it is, and this is, I think, a key thing to acting, especially we talk about like, method acting and Stanislavski, we probably don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but like when you have a personal connection to a character you're playing, you first have to know yourself, right? And I think if you know yourself and your experience and your dreams and your hopes and your challenges and the obstacles that you've had to go through, when you find that in another character and you're able to bring your experience and your voice into that character, I think it's a really beautiful thing. And what I've noticed with my students too, that's probably even more incredible, is being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, sometimes playing a character that you ordinarily would not identify with.
Right.
And being able to find your own personal experience that is in common with them that you never thought was, right?
Yeah.
And then once again, building that whole human being, for me, that's the type of adults I wish, we had more of running around, is those who feel that empathy, right?
Yes.
I think we started looking at empathy as like this bad word, like,
Yeah.
something that makes you weak or something. And
Yeah.
empathy is such a beautiful thing. And I think what keeps us all balanced. And that's one beautiful thing, art, and, for me specifically, theater does. And I think it's important in the classroom to create that sense of, you may not know exactly what it's like for that character or what it's like for that student that you're talking to. But break it down for a second. What's the next thing that you know, where can you find that common ground?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
Well, I always told my students, even the villain has a story. You know, like
yeah,
even
yeah.
even the person that you perceive to be the bad guy has a story itself. I'm gonna make you laugh a little bit and show my age, but Go Go Gadget, taking you back. You remember Go Go Gadget?
Yes,
Do you
yes,
remember the villain in Go Go Gadget?
yes. Dr.
He didn't
Claw.
like, yeah, Dr. Claw. He didn't like Go Go Gadget, but he loved that cat. So look, he was gonna kill the humans, but he loved animals. He was stroking that cat every episode. He loved that cat. So you know, maybe you don't identify with his character because he was trying to kill Go Go Gadget, but you love
Okay.
animals, and there's some commonality there. Big
Right.
beautiful word is empathy. And it goes back to what we were talking about before we start recording, which is you're in the business of building really good humans, really great citizens, right? Just good people outside of performing on stage. What you're working on, your work, your advocacy is really pouring into the spirit and the essence of who these people are going to be later on in life. And so I love that. But yeah, Go Go Gadget for sure.
That is a great analogy. It's always the pets, right? It's always the pets. That's the thing.
They always love pets. They always got a dog or a cat, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
or a bird. If you think about Aladdin,
yep,
Jafar had a bird. He liked that bird. Him and that bird they was cool, but
yep.
he wasn't cool with nobody else. So he just needed a little therapy, so how has your productions, and I love this question by the way, how has your productions addressed issues of identity, race, or community? And what has the response been? Now, you know, I've not seen any like of your provocative work, but your work is still is promoted an emotional response, a catharsis in some way of watching it because of your directorial style. But you can use this answer from your experience at because you teach at Spring Hill College, you teach at the University of South Alabama, as well as Baker High School. Dog, Eric, you're busy. I don't even know how you sleep. I don't understand. You're busy. But out of those three institutions, have you had any productions to address those issues of identity, race, or community?
Absolutely. And I would say all three. And it's I would say most recently, now of course, a lot of my work, especially with the high school with Baker, it's Seussical and
Yeah.
SpongeBob.
SpongeBob. I love
But
that show.
I will say they're not without
Right. I
um
agree.
plenty to be said. I mean, especially with Horton Hears a Who.
Yeah.
And listening to the smallest voice and making sure those who are vulnerable are taken care of.
Hmm.
Um, and so I mean there are a lot of elements that are there um for the high school crowd as well. Sometimes with our competition work we get a little bit more, a little bit more edgy, but
Yeah.
uh, um but with Joe Jefferson Players, it was actually my last production to direct at the Joe Jefferson Playhouse,
Hmm.
um, before I resigned. But that was Anne and Emmett, which was a play about basically an imagined situation where Anne Frank and Emmett Till had a conversation together in the afterlife about what happened. Um, both children, uh, both brutally murdered,
Hmm.
and talking about like the reasoning behind that. It's a very beautiful production, but it was, as a director who mostly does musicals, right? Footloose and, these kind of happy-go-lucky things. Um, I think within every theater season, there needs to be something that kind of makes us stop
Hmm.
and really, I mean, present the audience with a mirror, uh,
Yeah.
and not to point fingers, but to just ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Who are you and what are you standing for?
Mm.
Um, And that was something that I felt was important, especially in the sense that I'd started to learn that everybody knew who Anne Frank was. If I asked who knows who Emmett Till is, you get about like a quarter of those responses, right? This is like
Right.
such a story, and the fact that his mother really, the Emmett Till case launched the civil rights movement, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so that one was very, very, very special to me, and it was a good note to end on there as artistic director. But we had, the Jewish Film Festival was involved. We had People United to Advance the Dream involved. So just a really great collaboration throughout the community. And then, of course, we had free tickets for all local high school
Right.
students to come see the show. So really great educational outreach there.
Yeah.
And then there are other, and I would say that one is very much having a conversation. That play, which we had like a panel, guests from USA afterward to discuss. The other end of that was, my opening production at USA this year, or this past year, was The Giver.
Mm-hmm.
You know, primarily a book they read in, students read in middle school. But this general question of like a kid set in a community that does not want, the truth is too difficult, and therefore they disguise the truth, right? There's no differences to be allowed. Everything has to be nice and cozy, and there's no such thing as pain. They've erased all the history, so no one in the society knows anything about the past, and they live in this very, very, very comfortable, very manageable world.
Mm-hmm.
With no hot or cold emotions, or no hot emotions, right? And there's one man in the community who absorbs all that knowledge, who has to keep, he knows what war is, he knows what famine is and pain. And so if you're not familiar with that story, there's a young man who
Yeah.
is chosen to be the next giver, and he has
Yeah.
to uncover those secrets. But I also thought that was a very very important play for our community as well, right?
Yeah.
And these sort of questions about how we accept truth, and our ability to accept truth, even though it may be harsh and
Yeah.
difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but there are ways, and I do find it important for audiences to walk away wanting to have a conversation,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I said, like it's not all the time. I did, like when I've directed Cabaret, it was definitely a heartfelt, meaningful production, which led to discussion. But then Mamma Mia was not quite a, you know, it was a lot of, do you like ABBA songs, and let's sing and
Yeah. Yeah.
have fun, and there's nothing wrong with that either. So
I'm sure they left Mamma Mia and had conversations too
yes,
about,
yes,
yeah, the different
Chiquita,
songs. Yeah.
Chiquita. So
Yeah, I honestly, based on what I've seen of your work and hearing you talk about past productions, I feel like you are just doing a great work in the world. And you're leaving your mark in the hearts of every person that experiences your work and takes your class. And how amazing that we're talking about advocacy. And you mentioned that Emmett Till's mother, through her advocacy of her son's murder, really kind of kick-started the civil rights movement and got a lot of people on board with
right.
trying to make changes on a national level to prohibit this from continuing to happen, and identifying some of the issues in their own communities with race as it pertains to race relations. So I'm just so proud of you and proud of the work that you've done thus far. Shifting gears a little bit, We're going to talk about school systems. Yeah. As someone who teaches across multiple institutions, because I negated to tell the audience that you were the artistic director of Joe Jefferson Players, correct?
Right. Yep. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So again, you really do have a whole lot of jobs, Eric. But as someone who teaches across multiple institutions, University of South Alabama, Spring Hill College, Baker High School, what are some differences or challenges that you notice in how the arts are supported in, either sector, whether it's K through 12 or collegiate?
Yeah. I have. I will say this: I'm still quite new to the college, to the college world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of the times, as an adjunct professor or a guest director, it's like they tell me what's the budget, what's the rules, and we go with that. Spring Hill is going to be a little different of a scenario. I just started there in January.
Okay,
So
congratulations.
yeah. And so, that's my kind of my new baby in a sense, is that, I have very, very eager students at Spring Hill who want to, they want to perform. Some of them want to do a musical, and, right now it's finding different ways of, how do I go about advocating at that college level. So I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's cool. It's cool. We're all still learning.
it's
We're
a
all
new,
still figuring it out. Yeah.
I definitely will say I'm a lot more used to the, when it comes to high school, being able to luckily most of what I need comes directly within my high school.
Right.
So, and then, in the past, there's not as much of involvement with, with central office necessarily. But it is something that, like, we try to, if there's an event that they need us to come help with, like, I try to make sure the students are active and working with Mobile County Public Schools as much as possible. So, but yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm at this point, I'm a lot more comfortable, and I know how to navigate the school system. I think for public health a lot better than I do with, like, like sometimes I don't know who quite to email yet when it comes to I'm allowed to email them. So I do feel confident with Mobile County that it's like, if I have a question, I just,
Yeah.
I'll ask my supervisor, or I'll pop an email to someone or give them a call. So I do feel very, in that respect, very supported. I think that going back to community, it can be a little frustrating for teachers sometimes because, we feel like administrative or superiors are not necessarily hearing us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed in the past that sometimes the mistake is, it's like we think, it's a really bad decision, and most of the time is they don't really know.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had that interaction. And in the past, it's like, I know there was several years ago where, like, the theater teachers weren't getting a supplement for after school work. And, it got to the point where it was like, I just kind of said, like, okay, well, if we're not going to be paid for all this hard work, then I'm going to stop. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like this moment of, like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean you're not getting, So, it took a bunch of us going up to central office to a board meeting and just basically saying, like, here's what we're doing on a daily basis. And, it's not fair. And, so, luckily things like that, I mean, I'm much more used to the process, at the public school level, but, there's also, I have a lot of freedom in the sense that, like, if I want to have a fundraiser at, like, Fusakli's, like, the chicken finger restaurant, I'll just tell my principal I'm going to go do it, and then we're fine.
Yeah.
versus I think with, the colleges, it's like, okay, is there like a university wide, representative that I have to get approved
Yeah.
from? And then,
Yeah.
so yeah. So
So
still
what I hear
dancing.
you saying is you have to learn the system in order
Mhm.
to appropriately advocate within that system. But I also hear you saying that you have learned the Mobile County Public School Board system and the Mobile County Public School system to the point where you can advocate for yourself. And as a recipient of that stipend, I want to personally say thank you. Because I did not know that you guys did that. That was before I had got hired. And yes, theater teachers as well as band directors and coaches, we are spending our personal time
Yeah.
at the school working with the kids to ensure that they're getting the education, arts exposure, education they need, and that the community are going to get quality shows that you're producing and directing. Um, so for the sake of time, I'm going to move a little faster to some other sections of questions that I feel like the audience will really benefit from hearing your answers. Um, how do you involve families and local organizations in supporting theater and the arts at your school? I was at one of your shows. There were so many parents
Mhm.
there. They were selling tickets. They were handing out flyers for, I think, the breakfast bingo. Um, Event. They were marketing that. And you said earlier that you have maybe a student whose dad owns a wood company or whatever, lumber company, or
Right.
you have a student whose parent, works at a bakery. How have you been able to involve parents and families and local organizations in promoting the arts and supporting your program?
Well, I think now keep in mind it also ebbs and flows, right? You have, you know, um, some years are better than others as far as parent involvement. Um, I also have, keep in mind as well, I have a very large school. I have a lot of students. Musical theater class alone, I have anywhere from 45 to 50 students, right? Um, Technical theater is 50 students, but they're divided into two classes. So, we've gotten a very large program. So some of that helps with numbers. Like it may not be every parent that helps, or every parent sometimes helps in their own way. And
Yeah.
I think allowing a variety of different ways that they can get involved, right? It,
Yes.
it may not be like we work, University of South Alabama, they let us work a concession stand during the home games and we bring home a percentage of what we bring in, right?
Yes.
Not for everyone, right? It is a chaotic like 6 hour, on your feet, running around, um, but at the same time we have like I said, parents who don't mind, if they need to sew some costumes or if they need
Yeah.
to bring bottled water up. Like that's a big thing is we have some parents who they will go to Sam's and just load up an SUV full of bottled water and bring it up here for the kids, right?
Wonderful.
And so you have, people who want to help in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, for me, it has been um, holding regular meetings. Okay,
Mhm.
say is a big one. Um, Starting a newsletter. Okay,
Mm.
even if it's just monthly or quarterly, however you want to do it, but reaching out to them, making yourself accessible.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's also just getting yourself in front of those parents, right? And letting them kind of see you and what you're trying to do. And sometimes it's just putting a face to the name, right?
Yeah.
Um, but but I mean, it's truly like just showing that you genuinely care about their child and you're on the same team, you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
So
think showing them that you care about the kid, your their child, your student is
mhm.
a huge component to advocating and getting parents on board and local organizations. And I
Mhm.
love the fact that you want to accept help on all levels, whether it's you own a company and you want to donate in some way, or you just want to give some water or sew a costume, support looks differently. I want to make sure that I ask this question that's in our chat. Will you, Eric, discuss advocacy on a state level? How has Alabama had success in the arts? And I want to kind of, before you answer this question, just recently, you did touch on this earlier about them changing where theater lies when it comes to the career track. I think recently they moved theater under CTE or some form of theater. Is it technical theater that's under CTE?
So that's at the national board level. So
Okay.
this is kind of the odd thing about, I guess, arts in Alabama, specifically with theater, right? On a national level, for national board certification, they consider it career tech education.
Mm-hmm.
My push right now is to get Alabama to start recognizing technical theater as a career tech track for students, and we're not there yet. That's kind of if the next big thing I push for will definitely be that. So, but then you have in certain districts, theater is considered English language arts.
Yeah.
And then in some districts, it is considered fine art. And then I've also seen it be both acceptable or one way or the other. So it gets a little hairy when it comes to all of that. Advocacy, I would say, within Alabama, obviously everything recently has been cut.
Yeah.
A lot. And I think that's the next big challenge is going to be able to get get some of that funding back. But when it comes to, I know on the state level, one big push for Alabama has been Andy Meadows with as far as arts and education for Alabama. But there's actually a oh gosh, I've forgotten the name of it now. But they've come up with this. It's a software like that gauges each school and what kind of art opportunities they have.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look up the name. I've forgotten the name.
Okay.
Of it. But that's been a really cool resource. At least being able to see which areas have the most arts involvement, and it kind of gives them a score.
Yeah.
Or as maybe art search or something. I don't know. I'll look it up. I'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, sorry, I don't have quite as much, the Alabama.
No, but I think that's really important. And I recently attended a CTE conference, and they were talking about on the state of Alabama, the state level, that they are moving some of the theater courses under CTE to get some of the CTE funding. I guess it really would depend on what district you're in to see if they are, following those guidelines, or they offer all those theater courses and which ones would be under CTE. But what I think is really important is that the more we make the needs of the students known to the state of Alabama on a state level, and helping them see that there is career paths, direct links between theater exposure, and career job readiness. Whether they're going to be in the field of entertainment or production or not, there is a direct connection between performing arts and career job readiness. But specifically, if you want to talk about the jobs in the theater industry, there's a lot of tech jobs that they will be able to be employed and employable multiple markets throughout the country or the world.
I mean, I will say this for Mobile right now. Like, I have people calling me asking, do you have a student who can come work this event somewhere else?
Yeah.
A lot of the times I don't have enough students.
Yeah. Wow.
Have that,
Yeah.
And by the way, it was called Art Look Alabama.
Art Look Alabama, which is the software that can gauge how your arts programs are graded, or if they're utilized in your school. Is that what you would say?
It's an online database.
The online,
and
okay.
So yeah, kind of, But it forms sort of like a fine arts report card, I guess you'd say. But
Yeah, and I think that's important for people to see if we have enough arts in our schools, and if the arts that we have, are they having an impact on the students in
Mhm.
a tangible way? Not just, are they doing shows, but how are these arts supporting our academic efforts? Because that's what the administrators
Mhm.
want to hear, is how is it going to help the test scores, which in turn
Right. Yeah.
helps funding come to the school. So if they have that resource, they can identify if their arts are working and supporting in those efforts. Yuri has a question, Eric.
Mhm.
What are your best tips for translating marketing and learning materials for all learners and shows?
One more time. What was that?
Yeah, okay, sure. What are your best tips for translating marketing and learning materials for all learners and shows? So maybe she's asking about taking some of the materials that you're using for the shows and how you translating that information to the high school students where their levels are. How are you taking marketing information and materials and helping all the students learn this information, maybe with differentiated learning techniques,
Right.
or the
Right.
fact that they're on a different level than maybe adults would be. Maybe that's what you're, or is that, am I asking the question correctly, Yuri? Let me know in the chat. Go ahead, Eric.
And once again, I want to say this is like one of those when I was a younger teacher just starting out, and then looking at how I do things nowadays. The important thing is to never forget that the most important thing is the progress of the child, right? And that each child is going to have triumph looks different for each student.
Hmm.
Um, and so whereas I've noticed, and I've seen this a lot of the times, it's like teachers come into a room or come into a theater program, and it's like they go into it like they're casting a Broadway show, you know. Um, and I think they have to kind of step back and say, like, okay, well, this is not. For one, the students are usually terrified about the auditions, right? So they're already like, oh my god. But it is creating that space that, like, this is a learning environment, right? The goal is wherever you're at, if it's right here, we're gonna get you to here, right?
Yeah.
Um, it is, and that can be a challenge because for me, I have a lot of students, um, but it is taking it and going like, okay, well, this child's just starting to learn how to sing, right? So by the end of this process, we want them to know how to read sheet music at that point, right? We want them to grow confidently in their voice so they're not so shy. Um, and I have students, several students who are like on the spectrum. Um,
Yeah.
I have um, a student who's hearing impaired, um,
Wow. Okay.
and and I've had, I had a student who was visually impaired, who was a lead in the show, right? And
Wow. That's
just,
awesome.
it's once again thinking creatively. How can we go about accommodating this, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that's sort of the beautiful thing is like it's not you are looking at those individual children and how you're going to create a very successful product, right? Create a piece of work that the students are going to be proud of, the parents are going to be proud of. And it's not a Broadway show, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And we're totally, I've seen lots of good theater that's not a Broadway show, right?
Yeah.
A lot
Yeah.
of Broadway shows that were not good theater.
I
So,
think you're the closest we're gonna get to Broadway down here. So
oh no,
we're happy with your work.
I
Who
mean, it
needs
really is. It's
Broadway
like,
when we got you?
I guess what I'm saying in short is it's not the destination, it's the journey, right?
Oh
And
man, absolutely. Yeah.
but I think that's what it is with especially with theater education is and also like figuring out what I have students who they sign up for my class because they want to make the props, right? I
Mhm.
chose to do Alice in Wonderland last year because I don't like Alice in Wonderland. I think it's weird and I've never understood it. Like my students, um, they were great at designing props, like
Mhm.
handheld props. You give them like, whatever it was, and it's just like, oh, you need to be. We did Little Mermaid, and it was just like, oh, we need like an instrument that looks like a seashell. Okay, I got it. And they would go through this whole process, and it was beautiful, right? And I just started noticing that like they are so good at this sort of creativity, so let's let them go wild. And Alice in Wonderland had, I mean, that's like a designer's dream.
Yeah, it is.
Um, so it's like, I picked that show. I picked Seussical for the same thing. It's just like, let's let them, flex their muscles a little bit. And
Yeah.
so that's their thing, right? And then like I'll get to a point where like there's a new wave and it might be costuming, right? Or makeup design, or I've had some years we don't do a musical at all because all of a sudden the kids are really into Shakespeare, like so I think it's being able to ebb and flow. And like,
Yeah.
I have a student who handled all the marketing this year, right? She did um she reached out, she ended up finding a digital sign, like, here in Mobile, that like we could put the show poster on, and like she made those arrangements and
On
got me
her
the show
own.
on her own. And then of course, I mean, I had to
Wow.
pay for it, but like,
But she did that. She took
yeah,
that initiative.
she
Wonderful.
she designed the marquee for them. And
Wow.
um so it's really, once again, knowing your kids is like the key there, is because once you find out like what they're interested in and where their passion is,
Right.
um like I hate organizing things, and I have students that will like, I would offend them if I didn't let them go organize the props closet. Like,
No, yeah.
that's their
Like,
turf.
please go
And I
ahead. You
don't,
don't have to twist my arm. Please do it. Do it. Eric, we could talk all day long. I've enjoyed this conversation. I would love to end with this question and let you answer, and then we'll wrap it up. But what gives you hope right now when it comes to the future of arts education in the state of Alabama?
um, I think that what gives me hope, and I don't have, but there have been a lot of arts and humanities cut right now, so it is not the brightest of times. Um, so I think that hope is very, very important. Um, and I'll say this: arts, and theater, it's in our bones as human beings. You know, when you look back at the earliest civilizations, culture and art is there, right? It's the only thing that separates us from animals, really, right? Chimpanzees might use a tool, right? They may take a blade of grass and stick it in the ant hole and get ants, and it's like, but they don't go carve a picture of the moon goddess on it, right? We had pottery, and it's like, it's a tool. It gets water from here to there, but we're also going to draw beautiful pictures on the side of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we're going to tell stories, and we're not just going to tell
Mhm.
stories. We're going to tell them very well. We're going to put costumes on,
Yeah.
and it's just like that's in our DNA as human beings, and I don't think you can stifle it. You can push it down. It will just shift and change, and it will pop up somewhere else, and I think that's all throughout history we've seen it. So it may not be the iconic, we may not be in the best times for theater education right now, but I do have faith and I do have hope that it will, you know like a phoenix, just pop right back up. So
I literally just thought like a phoenix. I literally just thought that. That's so cool. Well, I thank you so much, Eric Browne, for answering our questions here at Amp Up Arts webinar. We are all about advocating arts and arts education for every child in the state of Alabama, and you are doing the good work, and we want to say thank you. Continue to enlighten, inspire, and motivate your students, because they will go beyond you and change the world as a result of your teaching. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for our viewers. If you have any questions, just please let us know. Visit our website at ampuparts.org and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Again, thank you, Mr. Browne. It was
Thank
a
you. This
pleasure
is an
interviewing
honor.
you. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.